Yes, we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Pulsar Helium live event here. Tom, great to have you. And before we kick off, guys, please feel free to post your questions in the chat. Oh, and I just have to put myself on mute. And Tom, great to have you here.
Very good to see you, Anna, and hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining in. So we'll start off with, I'll go through briefly our presentation, and then we'll leave it to, I see that there's a lot of questions coming in, so we'll do a good Q&A session as well. So
Yeah,
without
and Tom,
further
before we kick off, let's just give everyone a minute to join. Minnesota. Why, out of all places in the world, I would have thought Texas, Wyoming, places that have a kind of legacy, a heritage of oil and gas. Why Minnesota?
because it's not oil or gas, as simple as that. It's helium. So it's we're drawn by the geology. That's the answer. So the original discovery in Topaz, like any good discovery, was actually by chance, by accident, and so that's what we became aware of later. But in 2011, they were drilling for nickel, and they hit gas that contained high helium, and the opportunity wasn't really known, and it took a further 8 years until actually we got to see that gas analysis and see that it was just so rich in helium, and thus Pulsar Helium was born. So drawn by the opportunity.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And has that been challenging in the context of jurisdiction that Minnesota had to draft the legislation that you basically had to start from scratch in terms of setting the legal parameters there?
In my experience, and I've looked at a number of different jurisdictions, I'd say that Minnesota has been quite the pleasure, actually. So helium being a new commodity to go and explore and develop, you'll find that not many jurisdictions at all really are geared up for it. And so I would say that Minnesota has been very proactive. And last year, they put in place the new helium plus hydrogen and CO2 legislation. And so they've moved very rapidly, and it's been a pleasure to work with the people there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we still have people joining. Welcome, everybody. Please feel free to post your questions in the chat. And we have quite a few questions. So, Tom, how about we just rush through a few slides to give a quick introduction before we then kick off with the questions?
Yeah, no problem. Okay, happy to do so. Okay. Anna, can you please let me know if that's successful? Is it on the screen? Okay,
I can't see it yet on YouTube. So we have, by the way, Leonard behind the scenes doing all the magic. So Leonard, if you could just help us out here in terms of now we can see it. It's just the latency. So we've got the statement here, safe harbor statement, and the stage is yours.
Okay, super. I think it's important to start with, why? Why does pulsar helium exist? And this is the helium opportunity that's out there. And we have a distinct focus on the USA. Our flagship asset, our project, the Topaz Project, is in Minnesota, in the States, and the US is also the largest market for helium as well. But at the moment, the helium market, in terms of supply, is very fragile. So probably the largest issue is that helium is more than 95% of it is produced as a byproduct of natural gas production. So therefore, it doesn't have the ability to produce helium at the rate that the helium customers want it. It's at the rate of the natural gas market. So what we find is that there's a distinct lack of flexibility in there for the customer. And certainly with helium, with its applications in technology, we're seeing increasingly more and more uses for it. But what we don't see is any give in the supply system. That flexibility is not there. So what Pulsar does, and is part of a new industry effectively, is looking for geological helium, so in the ground, where it all comes from, but in reservoirs where it is the primary economic driver, it is not a byproduct. And that, certainly for the customer, is very desirable, because at the moment, the system is geared towards long-term take-or-pay contracts, where they would have a certain amount of product delivered at regular timeframes, should they need it or not. And then also their ability to get more product is not there because there is not a spot market for helium. So what we are looking at, and certainly with our focus on Topaz, is to bring online a primary helium occurrence that provides flexibility, because the actual storage for the helium is the reservoir itself, and could therefore then be producing gas at the rate that the customer needs, not at a set rate as it is now as a byproduct. So that's the opportunity. So what we have is our Topaz Project in Minnesota, and so extremely high concentration helium, so 14.5%. This is where helium is a bit similar to, say, precious metals. It's all about grade. You don't get a pure helium stream coming out of the ground. You get a percentage of that gas being helium. And to get it up into the double digits there is quite something. And it's the highest that we've seen recorded in North America. And so
I remember the excitement in March 24 when we were at the PDAC in Toronto, and 13.8. That was the grade. What an excitement. And by the way, we have right now 530 people joining us. So thanks everyone for taking the time. And Tom will be ready with the slides shortly, and then we'll crack on with your questions.
Yeah, certainly. No, that was a good time. So when we drilled the Jetstream #1 well last year, and proved beyond any doubt that the helium occurrence there was real. And so now we've conducted more recent drilling this year. And we've also got a second project as well in Greenland. We found a primary helium occurrence there, but it's at an earlier stage, which is why we're focusing our efforts on Topaz in Minnesota. We are looking towards production, certainly. We know that we're off to a tremendous start with that gas coming naturally up to surface in high concentration. So we've aligned ourselves with a group called Chart Industries, who is more or less the gold standard for designing and fabricating industrial gas facilities. Myself and my colleagues, we have a vested interest in this company's success. We do hold a large position in the company, and along with it, we have an experienced team, as experienced as you can be, more or less, for helium, which is a young industry. But myself and some of my other colleagues have been in the industry now for over a decade. And then, of course, the helium opportunity. It is a very valuable commodity. And so really, this slide here, we're talking about the price per metric ton, because that is the unit of measurement for liquid helium, not gas. So our intention is to look at liquid helium, because that is the bulk transportable commodity that's used for the high end of industry. And when you compare the price there to natural gas, you can see here it really is a very valuable small volume commodity that is dearly in need, and is major producers, the US, Qatar, Algeria, and Russia. But the key message here is that USA production is in decline, and to have a new domestic resource would only help to avoid importing from abroad. Our project is in northern Minnesota, Topaz, and in order to produce helium, you really need two key logistical items. So one is a road network to be able to get the trucks out. So we're not talking pipelines, it is trucks of liquid helium. And so that certainly exists where we are. The other key consumable is electricity. And so you need that to produce the liquid helium, and there's electricity nearby. The majority of that comes from hydropower. And then just off to the west of our project, you've got some of the very large iron ore mines of North America there as well. So this is a location that is used to resource extraction with a history of, it's close to 150 years of resources there. So what we have is private mineral rights where we've been exploring. We have those, and the state of Minnesota has been very supportive with new legislation coming in as well. That was last year. So that gives a pathway to production, but then also the ability for the state of Minnesota to lease state land for helium exploration and development. And that's certainly something that we're talking to about them, so that we're ready as soon as that opportunity presents itself. So with this one, we do have an initial resource, and this is based off, actually I might just skip forward a couple of slides. So here on this section, we can see two drill traces in the red, and then with the first one, Jetstream 1, the drill trace top component of that is in blue. That's what we drilled last year, and the red is what we drilled this year. And based purely on that blue component, before we deepened it, we used a group called Sproul out of Denver to put together a resource calculation, and they came up with a P50 gross recoverable helium % prospective resource of 0.4 billion cubic feet based on just that blue section of the well, nothing else, no other drill holes that we've inherited. And 0.4 billion cubic feet of helium, to put that into perspective, the world uses 6 billion cubic feet of helium per annum. So based on half a well, effectively, we are getting off to quite a healthy start. And Sproul also said that a 65% chance of commerciality based on that one well.
And Tom, could we just get back to the previous slide that you were showing with the 2 wells? Because we have a great question here from Sukman Grival. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Also, Wesley Minton is saying thanks for the kind words on Chart Industry, and they're very proud and excited to be able to support Pulsar along the journey. So best regards. And kicking off with the first question here, on Jetstream 1, at what stage are you with the testing, and when will you announce the results?
Yeah, well, we actually have just announced results, so they came out last week. So what we announced there was we saw there's 2 rates of flow that you can get, and so one is natural flow, and that is purely when you open up the wellhead and then the gas that comes out naturally out of the ground, and then the second one is under compression. So you reduce the wellhead pressure in order for the well to breathe better. And so what we just announced was the natural flow result. And if we were to say compare that to pre-deepening, so the 2024 result, what we actually saw was a 3-fold increase in the flow rate. So it appears that the deepening of the well has been successful, and now there is additional testing, and that will be disclosed to the market as and when it's received and being verified.
And you already have an estimate on how many weeks that's going to take?
I mean, it's currently underway, so the long won't be very long. The wait won't be very long.
Okay, cool. For those that have just joined, because I've seen now we have 1,196 people joining us. So hey guys, great to have you all here to hear about Pulsar Helium. And please feel free to post your questions. We just started to work through the questions on Jetstream 2. What are the timelines for the cleanup and testing of the well?
Okay, so with Jetstream 1, which we've just talked about, and once we've completed activities there, then we will move across to Jetstream 2.
Okay, that's good. And is there any consideration to move from AIM to the LSE main market in the next 12, 18 months?
No, that is not on the radar. We've only just listed on AIM, actually, what was it, less than a year ago. So I think that's probably had enough compliance and listing processes for the moment. We'll be concentrating our efforts into putting all of our capital into the ground.
Okay, and then just as a wrap up here on that question block, what percentage of sales revenue will Pulsar retain after deduction of lease royalties, mineral levy tax, severance tax, and so on, and corporate tax? Wow, that's a very heavy one. I don't know if we can answer that off the cuff, or should we park that for later?
Appreciate the question, but yeah, look, it's inevitable that when you start up a business and start generating revenue, that you have to pay taxes. So that's always there. But in terms of, we're doing this work at the moment, and we've just raised some additional capital. The lion's share of that money is going to drill further wells here so that we can increase the size of the resource. So going back to this slide here, is that we've got off to a tremendous start. But in order to justify the capital expenditure, building a new helium plant, you need to be able to say with confidence that you have X years worth of product that you could produce. And so we are at that stage. And so really, once we have that completed, so we're looking to get that underway this year, we're looking to drill up to additional 10 wells. And those wells will be for resource, so they're not for production, they're for resource. Which is why they're quite cost competitive compared to what we've already drilled. But with those, we'll get the data that we need out of them to be able to upgrade our resource via a third-party estimator. And then once we have that, the intention is that early next year, we'll have all that technical well information with the assistance of Chart Industries and looking at the plant design there and different scenarios and sensitivities. And then, of course, taking into account then, okay, price, and then also whatever deductions are there, that all goes into the feasibility study, which is what will be the culmination of all this field work that is currently underway. So I cannot answer the question now, but it is something that will be coming early next year is our intention.
And tying into that, Tyler M is asking, do you have enough information to place a valuation on the reserves? You partially answered that, but on the 0.4 billion cubic feet, is that kind of already an indication of the commercial value those 0.4 billion cubic feet would have?
We don't talk about so much of the value of it. I mean, what it's showing is that there's a significant amount of helium there, and so this is certainly like.
Okay, then let me rephrase it. If you would extract 0.4 billion cubic feet, what kind of value would that have at a market right now?
That's not very difficult for people to calculate. So the pricing information's out there. So I suggest a pretty simple multiplication, that one.
Okay, because I mean, one of the things that I did notice on social media, people talking about the transparency in helium, as it doesn't have a spot market. A lot of it is traded directly with offtake agreements. So is there any indication on the value that you could give as the expert here in the helium space?
Yeah, I mean, what we see is that there's different helium that's out there. So you've got helium in gas form, pure helium, but in the gas form, and then you have helium in a liquid form, which is the most high value product that you could produce. Whilst a lot of the pricing is in these long-term confidential offtake agreements, you certainly do see pricing from import-export data. So for international shipping of helium, you can get pricing there. You can also get it from some listed companies that then must disclose what their offtake values are. So those are the sources of information for pricing.
Okay.
But certainly we see in the USA that the pricing is healthy.
Good. Then just staying with the helium as a commodity, what's the key difference between natural gas and primary helium? As you've just mentioned in Minnesota, you're kind of a helium pure play. So what's the big difference also when you were talking about natural pressure gas versus, so natural gas versus helium?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So without trying to get too technical on this one, is that we see that natural helium systems, primary helium systems, reservoirs in the ground, so what we are seeing at Topaz, is that the helium, it's migratory. It's come from somewhere else and then gets trapped in this reservoir. And so because it's migratory, you typically see that therefore primary helium systems have a lower pressure than, say, natural gas systems or hydrocarbon systems. And then also without having the water there as well. So you've got the hydrostatic pressure, which is something that we don't have. So hydrocarbons typically, generated in situ and then go along permeable layers and so on. So you could effectively get this more sort of tight gas scenario, higher pressure regimes, whereas helium is migrating in from somewhere else. So it's typically lower pressure. But lower pressure is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, this is what it is. To get a high pressure helium system without hydrocarbons is going to be, fairly difficult geologically.
But kind of the essence, Tom, is that you don't need high pressure for the project to be commercially viable and to create value for the
flow rates that we've shown and that we published last week were certainly very healthy. And so with that multiplied by the very high helium concentration, you're looking at a very prolific helium system. But I'm also just finishing up on that point. One of the most prolific helium systems that's ever been discovered and exploited in Arizona, Pinta Dome. That one there was a low pressure helium regime, and it's gone down in history as the most prolific source of primary helium. If you also look in the United States at, say, the Hugoton gas field, that is very much a low pressure gas system, but a hydrocarbon low pressure system, and that's been producing for almost 100 years now. So low pressure is not an issue.
Yeah. Cool. That's good to know. And we currently have a lot more people that have just joined. So thanks, everyone. We're talking about helium here in Minnesota, the US, a helium pure play. And we've just been talking about grades, the difference to oil and gas. And Protiva Shoraf, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, is asking, great progress. Any exciting updates on securing offtake agreements? And we have a question from BB. Where do you currently stand in terms of offtake? So offtake agreement, that seems to be a hot topic here. Your thoughts?
Yeah, certainly. Well, look, that's all part of the end game for us, is that we get to a point where we can then entertain offtakes. But it comes back down to this work program that we're looking to embark upon now, drilling these additional wells, so we know how much gas is there and how much could be produced. To go and have an offtake discussion now is somewhat meaningless because we cannot fit in all the criteria that the customer would be asking. But are we already having, do we know who they are and so on? Do we have dialogue? Certainly we do, and we're certainly acutely aware of who the potential customers could be in the future.
Okay, and any expectation on timeline or number of quarters where we could then expect news release and progress on those discussions?
Yeah, well, look, going back to that earlier question, so really we get this field program completed so that in the first half of next year, we're then in this stage where we can do a resource update, feasibility study, have the economics, and then should all that come out looking, good, then the logical next step would then be to go and have those offtake agreements, because it all ties into then the plant build. So for any potential plant that could be built there, you're looking at a lead time of about 12 to 18 months, from design, fabrication, commissioning, going online. And so our intention for that is that it will be debt financed. So it's not something we want to go and do equity financing for, but debt financing. And in order to have that debt financing, then you need to have something to show a bank, and that would be the offtake agreements. So the logical time would therefore be once the economics have come out, and should they look favorable, that is when we would start to go down that path.
Okay, and that of course ties into funding. You just mentioned debt. There has been a lot of support from the US of kind of reducing independence from or dependency from imports. So there was a question here on funding with the US as it's kind of a strategic commodity. Any thoughts you can share on that?
What, funding from the United States itself? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah, well, look, we do have quite a number of US shareholders in our registry. We're actually very actively traded on the OTC QB market in the US as well. So we see some good volumes out of there. We have University Bank out of Michigan. They're a 4.99% shareholder in our company, have been very supportive. We recently announced that they are very much there to see us through the value chain. So when we do go towards that discussion of potential debt financing of a plant build, they've already showed their intention or interest in a non-binding form, but nevertheless the interest of 12.5 million going towards that. So look, certainly the financial support in the United States is very much there.
Okay, yeah, and by the way, we have Sven and Björn just looking at the questions behind the scenes. So thanks very much, guys, for helping us out. And do post your questions if you've just joined. I think we've had over 150 people join us in the last 10 minutes. So feel free to post your questions, and great to have so many of you here and talking about helium out of the US, out of Minnesota. So as you've just raised 9 million, the question here is coming up. What did you do with your, or what is the plan with those 9 million? Is that all going to go into the next drilling, the next exploration stage, or what are your plans?
Yeah, so that must be 9 million Canadian that we're talking about there. So with that one, so the funds there, most of it will be going to the Topaz Project and going into the ground. And so what we see there is majority of that is drilling. So as I said, we're looking to drill up to 10 wells. And so with that, it's where we do Jetstream 1 and Jetstream 2 in the southern portion of our license area. They're very close to each other. And each well has an area of influence around it when it comes to the resource. So now it's a case of, okay, we understand now much better than we had, say, a year ago, now the reservoir properties and so on and so forth. So now we can then start to step further afield. So step away and start to incrementally increase the size of the resource is the objective. And so therefore, the majority of the funds raised will be going towards this drilling. As I say, look, with it, we're using resource drill, and it would be something that would then be contributing to the resource itself. And because it's not going to be cased all the way down ready for production, we can therefore have quite a cost saving and could get these wells a lot cheaper than they had been in the past.
Okay, and then Carsten is asking, hi Thomas, do you have the necessary funds for the next 12 months, or do you plan an additional capital increase?
Yeah, well, actually, it's out there in the public domain that with it, so the financing that we did, we had to put forward a 12-month budget for that, and that has been included in it. So yes, we are budgeted for 12 months.
Okay, and then a similar question along the same line, Michael De Francesco, I hope you pronounce your name correctly. Will the economic assessment be done based on the Jetstream 1 and 2, or is it planned for an additional drill program?
Well, the additional drill program is happening, so that's what we just raised the money for, and so it will be all encompassing. All the results that we'll have from the different wells will be going into it. So they're all part of that.
So there's going to be Jetstream 3, 4, and 5 along the road.
That's right.
Okay, cool. So we're looking forward to Jetstream 3, 4, 5, and consecutive, and that's going to then go all the way through into 2026.
Yeah, that's correct.
And from what I understood, you have drilling all year round, or what's kind of the climate weather constraints that you have of Minnesota?
Look, we with the drilling that we've been doing beforehand, we've been doing that midwinter, and it's not for the faint-hearted, but certainly the drill rig can still keep on going, so it's not a problem. So summertime, wintertime, it just depends. Do you prefer mosquitoes or do you prefer cold weather?
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. So yeah, for anyone who's just joined now, please do post your questions, and Björn and Sven, please let me know. Yeah, it's coming up now. Thanks again for organizing that for us. How much land has Pulsar secured around the Topaz discovery? So I can't see who posted that question, but it looks like a very good one.
That's a good one. So we've got just short of 6,000 gross acres. So that's directly in the area where the wells have been drilled, and so then the balance outside of that really is mostly state land, and so we touched on that earlier, Anna. So with the state, last year they put in the legislation the ability to lease state lands, and so when they're ready to do so, we've certainly indicated our interest in that, and so that would be one that could have perhaps an incremental difference on a lease package. So yeah, but I'm confident that certainly with what we've achieved, we've tied up the areas that are immediately available for leasing are under Pulsar leasing.
So if you already tied up these areas, I mean, that's very good for long-term value. What about the competition? Because that's the second question here. Are they kind of following you, or are you such an early adopter here with Minnesota not having that legacy that you're kind of all to yourself for the time being in Minnesota with the helium pure play?
Well, look, it wouldn't surprise me if competition comes. Like we, got a good feel that this is quite a large geological system. But I guess the issue is that prior to our arrival, there was a discovery that was made, and that's what we have leased and we've re-drilled. So that, but the rock unit where above the gas, it's more or less impermeable. So at surface, you can't actually detect helium leaking. So it's very hard to know, where does X mark the spot? It's not obvious. And we've also taken years to acquire gravity surveys, seismic surveys, incredible amounts of geochemistry. We've got a very capable team behind me, and we probably need to put them in the camera a bit more often because, our VP of Engineering, Brad Cage, operations with Michael Sturdy and Steve Campbell, our PhD geologist, Nick Schofield. That's taken years to be able to get to a point where now we're confident to go out and drill these additional wells. So, I certainly welcome competition because, as I say, I think this is quite broad, but for them to catch up to us, it's years worth of data that they need to catch up on.
Yeah, and talking about the team, we have a question from Peter Schoen. Peter, sorry, we missed your question earlier, and he's asking, Michael was impressive at Topaz. Where did you send him?
Where did I send him?
Yeah, that's how Peter put the question.
Well, we sent him to Topaz. No, he's been very active over there, and Michael's he's wonderful. So Michael Sturdy, he's been with us right from the beginning here, and so in terms of his experience with operations, implementing drill programs, but then also just we've taken a very proactive approach to be able to invite the local community, everyone to site, and to create awareness. I mean, as we're doing right now, I fully appreciate that helium is a very new industry, and there's a lot of questions out there. And one earlier, how's it similar to hydrocarbons? And obvious questions like that. And Michael's been incredibly good with the local community and the broader, indeed, community in Minnesota to be as transparent as we can. So look, if he's not on site right now, he'll be probably talking to someone in one of the nearby towns or doing a town hall meeting or something like that. So
okay, yeah, maybe there's a chance to get more social media content from Michael from Topaz. So thanks, Peter Schoen. Great to have your question. And then from Center S is asking, if exploration is successful in the future, how quickly could Pulsar realistically bring Topaz into production? I think you talked about 12 to 18 months after
yeah,
everything.
that's it's a good rule of thumb to use. So should everything go just fine, and we want to then proceed, then at that moment where we effectively push the big green button to go, then it's about 12 to 18 months to have.
And then the next question from Center is, how big could this become? Well, that's the $1 million question, and that can't be answered at this moment in time.
That's why we're doing the work that we're doing, and
it's not yet clear how big overall the helium resource is going to be.
Well, how big it could be, I mean, we know geologically that this is quite large. Now, what we have to do then is to then go and define it so that there's no doubt. But in terms of the actual helium source rock, in terms of the area of interest that has the right geology to be a reservoir, it is quite extensive. And it goes back to earlier with the competition, that I think it's inevitable there'll be competition at some point, but it is quite a vast area that is going to be pretty hard to pinprick. And that's why we take this approach where we've got jet stream number one, and then we branch out from that conservatively and with the depth of data that we need, so that we can say, okay, when we drill, we're giving it the best chance of success, that we're not just going wildcatting and just hope that something may work. That is definitely not the approach that we take.
And I think it's similar with other investments. When you see Rocket Lab, best regards here to the Rocket Lab fan base, and you see the likes of Blue Origin coming in with Jeff Bezos. Yes, it creates also competition, but it also verifies that there is a big total addressable market and that the TAM is interesting, the margins are interesting. So obviously you at some point even want to have competition with being way behind, but at some point verifying, yes, okay, interesting market, high margins. So yeah, competition definitely a good indicator. Then Shorav Ghoshal is asking, why does this early Jetstream 1 success matter so greatly?
This is what geologists and exploration companies live for, making that wonderful discovery. And so I guess to why this? So to have the flow rate greater than 3 times than what it was last year. So for helium, the key ingredients that you need is, obviously you need as much helium in the gas as possible. So we've got off to a great start with that. The next one is, how rapidly does it come out the ground? That's your production rate. And this is where it differs to, say, mining, if people got a background there. So this is like, how many tons can you dig up a year? Well, the gas flow rate is the equivalent to that. So how much gas comes out? And that tells you things like, okay, well, how many wells do you need to go into production? And so obviously the higher the flow rate number, the higher the helium concentration, then the better it would be for any production scenario. So that's why we're so pleased.
Yeah, it just increases the commercial value of your operation, the outlook of the potential economic value of your operation going forward. So yeah, absolutely cool. And then we've got a question here coming in with no name attached. The US has historically been the world's largest helium supplier, but has increasingly relied on imports in the recent years. Yeah, that ties in a bit what we discussed earlier on getting a government, getting support. You already mentioned that Minnesota has been very supportive. So anything else in terms of the Critical Minerals Act or so, something that you could share of additional support coming further down the line as the US is seeking to become more independent?
Well, look, that would be speculation, but what I can say is that, look, helium #1 production has been out of the United States, but like anything, these gas fields only have a finite period of time that they can produce, and then the production rate goes down, and then with that, the amount of helium that they can produce goes down. And so then here it is. You either find new domestic sources or you rely on imports from abroad. And one of the other problems with the imports is that helium doesn't really like to travel long distances. That's the other thing. It's a very small atomic size, the second smallest. and it likes to leak through things. And so another reason why having domestic supply is preferential to foreign supply, because not only is it then up to geopolitical risk, fine, but on top of that, you've just got standard loss as it's transported to its final destination. So everything points to new domestic sources being preferable to anything else.
Okay, yeah. There's no further questions at this moment in time. So Tom, as quite a few people have only joined in the last 15 minutes, how about we do an elevator pitch and just wrap up what we discussed the last 30 minutes? Would that be okay?
Yeah, sure. Look, I'm happy to do so. So it's okay. So look, in summary for us, so it's all about primary helium, and we've got the two projects, Topaz in Minnesota, two new in Greenland. But Topaz is what we're talking about because it's more advanced and it's in the USA, which is the world's biggest market for helium. And so what we've done is we've drilled the Jetstream 1 well. We found that the high helium was there. We deepened that, and we recently announced that the flow rate had increased by over 3 times. So that tremendous success there. And then additional information to come with what we've drilled. But now with the placement that we recently conducted, and so the funds from that are going into additional wells, the intention to drill those. And the objective there is to increase the size of the resource. So then sometime next year, we can then say, okay, we've got all the key parameters. We know the size, the volume, we know the flow rates, we know the concentration. We could then come up with a robust economic model to then say, okay, does it warrant going into production or not? And so that's the data gathering stage that we're at. We think that we've got off to a tremendous start for really, the first mover in this location in an area that has got incredible potential. We know that geologically this is a large system, but only 2 wells have been drilled. So to get that additional depth of data, and also look, our frame of mind is, obviously we want to go into production as and when we can. The options are we can do it as professionally as possible, to have a resource that's substantiated, to build a brand new helium plant that is specific for our gas and our location. Or the other option is just, and you've seen this, and it typically hasn't ended up very well, we're racing to production, using effectively quite a cheap plant or a second-hand helium plant or something like that, something that hasn't been tried and tested, in the hope that start to generate revenue as soon as possible. But that's not easy. That is not straightforward, and that's not the game that we're playing. It's really to be professionally getting the size of the resource up, and whatever the data dictates, and then move forward with that. But ideally, going for something which has got meaningful production rather than just something that's small, just to keep it ticking along.
And closing off with a final question here from the audience. What could the discovery mean for Minnesota in the next decades?
Well, it's a nice bit of diversification, hopefully. So it's something which really it's not unique, but there's not many places on the planet that you can find primary helium occurrences, and certainly ones that are this high concentration. So I'd say that it's a wonderful opportunity for Minnesota, and for something that the world dearly needs for technology and healthcare, and with an absolutely minimal footprint as well, and for something which is a non-hazardous material, and all about this technical evolution that we're on. So it's I would have considered it only to be good news.
Okay, super. Tom, thanks for taking the time today and sharing all your insights on this helium pure play with high grades out of Minnesota. And we look forward to our next session. Everyone stay tuned, and then good luck with the next flow results, high grades and high pressure.
Thanks very much for your time, and thank you everyone for listening.
Take care, everyone. Cheers and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.